Welcome, everyone. My name is Dan. This is Spiritual Underground Podcast. It's coming to you from an office high above the town of Juicyville, Kentucky. Today's topic is step one, but before we get to that, I'm going to go around the table real quick and tell you who's in the room with us, who's in the studio today. Today we have Drew with us. Drew and Kevin are both working primarily behind the board. You will hear from them today. We've got Todd with us, Quentin, Shane, Smitty, and Dawn. So that'll be your crew for today, and we're going to talk on step one. So step one goes like this. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I've had struggled not to put the and in there. In the middle there, it is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, hyphen, that our lives had become unmanageable. So we know this powerless and unmanageability are main points of this step one. In the book, someplace I learned that someplace I picked up that honesty is the principle behind it, and it's a good dose of surrender is always required too. That elusive point of surrender. It's about admitting complete defeat, becoming humble. We probably will be talking about why a bottom is so important tonight. We have these concepts of the mental obsession and the phenomenon of craving when it comes to our substances. Behaviors tend to have those same kind of things where we end up with this like allergy effect. But once we start doing a little of it, we have trouble to stopping. So my mentor, my sponsor, gave me this scenario as I came in. He said, let's say you are running a company, and that company is called Dan Incorporated. So what he said is, take a look and see what is the overall health of this company right now. Is it reaping big profits? Is it fun to work there? Are you experiencing more and better juice day to day as you walk the path? Am I continuing to expand my horizons and grow throughout the process? Or am I damn near bleeding out, wondering if I can even make it to the next day, barely having a pulse? Is everything fine and good as I would like you to believe it is, and I claim it is? Or is my life in need of immediate intervention, some sort of emergency support? And that was the case before I got here. And he said, if that intervention and that emergency life support was what was needed, that maybe I should take a look at letting somebody else operate this thing called Dan Incorporated, fire the previous manager, and hire a new one. So I may get into it a little bit more after a while, but my first step was handed to me, and I'm not going to go into depth on it at the moment. We may get there. Next up, I'm going to toss the microphone over to Shane, see what he has to add to step one.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening. We admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Yeah, I didn't like to admit that I was powerless over anything. My ego was so huge. I did not want to admit nothing, and my life unmanageable. No, I can manage this on my own. I was doing good. I was lying to everybody, and everybody was believing my lies. I was a good manipulator. But I heard in a meeting today this woman said that she came in to recovery on her own free will. And that just hit me wrong, man, because I did not come in here on my own free will. I came in here because my disease absolutely beat me into submission, and I crawled into recovery looking for a solution, and I found one. And I'm thankful for that today, because I was doing it on my own for so many years, trying to do it, and I'd get a little bit of time under my belt off of one substance to another, but nothing of any substantial amount of time, and I've learned more in this past 2 years than I did the previous 39 before it, and I'm very grateful for what recovery's shown me today. And we'll talk about more about my bottom here in a little while or another episode, but tonight just primarily, being able to admit that we were powerless. That was not me until I came in here, and I'm grateful that I could say I'm powerless today. And I'll pass it over to my man Don over here.
Thanks, Shane. My name is Don. Where do I start with the first step? When I came into recovery, I heard a lot that nobody comes in here on top. Nobody has a really good drunk or a really good high or just a really good situation and says, you know what, I'm going to go to a meeting today. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. For most of us, we have hit some sort of bottom. When I came into the rooms, when I sat down, I did the typical introduction. My name is Don. I am fill in the blank. Recovery goes to a lot of different. There's a lot of different things that we can come to recovery for. For me, I did that, and I came in. I said, "My name is Don. I am blank," and I thought I was good with it. I sat down with a sponsor at the time because it was time for me to start the step work. Step 1, he asked me, this is kind of a 2-part question. Are you powerless over alcohol? And with me, I told him a story. I couldn't answer yes or no. I couldn't just say the words. I told a story, and I rambled. And he looked at me and he goes, okay, but Don, is your life unmanageable? Have you lost control over this? And I told him another story. What he proceeded to do is tell me that you're failing, Don. You can't even say the first step. So we kind of pressed pause, and I sat back, and he said, it's a yes or no question, but you got to look inside yourself. And I asked him again. I said, well, in the meetings, I say it every time. It's easy to say those words. He said, but now you're asking yourself. You're looking inside yourself at that first step and coming to that realization that your life has become unmanageable. So that was my first step.
This is Smitty. How's it going, fellas? My experience with the first step generally has to do with a lot of breaking down of my ego. I'm a very egotistical person. I definitely have a lot of what I had a lot of when I first came into recovery was intellectual pride. I thought I was so smart. I thought because I read books, that made me somehow better than other people. Because I, actually dragged my face across some printed type and understood what it said, that I was somehow like above people because I read books by people that, were revered in literature, and so I was really smart. And it turns out that when I came into to recovery, I didn't really know very much, but I thought I did. And to have somebody tell me, well, how's all that working for you? That's ultimately the question, the answer, the question that comes to mind when it comes to powerlessness is, that's all well and great. Like Don was talking about the stories. That's all well and great, that story you told me, but how's that working for you? And it all comes down to boiling it down to that. How much power do I have? I don't have very much at all, especially when I first come in. I certainly have no power when it comes to what other people do. The other big thing is I tend to fight things even when I have no solution at all. And the greatest thing about recovery is coming in and asking somebody else what to do, which is very, very difficult for people like us, is to say, hey, guy that I don't know very well, how do I do this thing, this life thing?
Help me.
Help me, absolutely. And that's a very hard thing to do when you're a prideful person. And pride is what we have to crack through in step 1. And that's a very, very hard rock to crack. And sometimes you're not ready. And the whole point of the Serenity Prayer is to realize what I can change and what I can't. And that's where we break down what we can do in life. When I stop fighting, I look at what I can change and not what I can't, which is unfortunately one of the things I do a lot is, hey, maybe if I could just convince them enough. No, it's not just about alcohol and drugs, because once I put that stuff down, life shows up, and there's a lot about life that I need to still learn how to stop fighting. And so
the step says we're powerless over alcohol, but you were alluding to that you're powerless over some other things.
Absolutely. I'm powerless over relationships. I'm powerless over sex, food, alcohol, obviously, drugs. I'm powerless. When I say I'm powerless over those things, what I mean is I don't mean that a beer can literally, kick my ass. I mean that the influence it has on my brain will always take me in a direction of making the wrong choice, unless I have a spiritual awakening. There are still certain food, for instance, for me, still I'm working on. Food will take me from making a good decision to a bad decision. It will take all the information that's in your head, all of the good data, and it will push it aside and just say, screw it. And that happens more than I'd like to admit with that particular thing. It's something I'm still working on. But like I said to Nick when I first started sponsoring him was, let's take care of the bullet wound before we take care of the paper cut. The bullet wound right now is your alcoholism. The paper cut is your smoking or your food. So as far as the endless things that can have influence over us, those are the big ones for me.
Thanks, Smitty. I'm Quentin, man, and I really dig this first step. When I first came into recovery 16 months ago, man, I never felt I was powerless. I knew my life was unmanageable because I was crippled up after a truck wreck. I couldn't afford to pay rent. I couldn't afford to pay my utilities or anything. But then the powerlessness part, man, I was always a big, stocky guy, strongest man in my family, lifting weights and stuff. And to me, powerlessness made me feel like I was a weak motherfucker. And I didn't like that idea. I never wanted to come down to that level. But then I got stuck in the West End in a fucking halfway house that I really hated it, man. I was surrounded in the worst neighborhood by people that I wouldn't never come around, which it's interesting, man, because this powerlessness part, whenever I came to it, my mentor in life, he was ready to fire me, and that really made me start thinking and get willing to dig down deep inside of me and be honest with myself. And that's when that's when I decided I was powerless over just about everything in my life, man. Food, alcohol, drugs, women, people pleasing. I tried to please everybody, and that's where my life drug me to. But the unmanageability part, it was the easiest thing for me. And I don't know, it's just I was 3 months sober, and my sponsor was telling me that I had to get honest with myself and figure out what I wanted to do in life. When I first came into recovery, I wasn't serious about it. I was just trying to get enough friends and get a little heads up in life, make people believe in me and everything. Now, I don't know what my ulterior motive was in that, but at 3 months in recovery, something just clicked in me, and now I'm using step one in every aspect of my life, into losing weight. I quit smoking, quit drinking, learning how to focus on not caring what you think of me. I don't care. It's not any importance to me, so I don't have to please anybody. But that's pretty well all I got.
There's a statement that says, somebody says, it's none of my business what you think of me.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't care, because I don't think that's a little bit off, but I think it's plenty correct to say that it really is none of my business what you think of me.
It's easier said than done. Very easy
For sure.
That's why we say we practice these
Absolutely.
things,
In
right?
all of our affairs.
Todd, what you got, babe?
It's Todd here. Powerless and unmanageable. Wow. Yeah, I was powerless and unmanageable. I'm probably the youngest one sitting in here as far as days sober. I'm sitting at 52 days, and I walked into that room, and
Way to go, man.
Yeah, good job, man.
after talking to my sponsor, I was powerless and unmanageable over a whole lot of other things. I thought it was just the alcohol, but I'm way, way behind you all, and I hope that one day I get the juice and everything that's going on in this room. Because,
If
like
you
I said,
want
day
what we
52,
have.
Stick around.
I realized that alcohol is just the tip of it. It's a lot more. It goes a lot deeper than that. So that's all I got right now.
Cool, Todd. Yeah, that And Todd is one of the ones that he come in because I think he's changed his mind too. And you watch people, you can actually see a shift. I think when you see a guy that actually starts getting a hold of the step one concept, starts getting that in his life. Because Todd did drop those lines in a chat we have going on where we support each other, and he said those words of, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. And then we started asking him some questions, and he started reconsidering maybe that wasn't quite sure, right? Wasn't quite true, because the fact of the matter is most of us have walked around caring a hell of a lot about what everybody thought about us. We might want to play that tough guy rule, and that's one of the problems why we have trouble coming to powerlessness, is because we've been trained, we've been programmed to this "I got this" deal. That powerlessness is not something that we can accept or are going to admit about.
I wanted to just chime in here real quick and
Go
say
ahead,
something
Shane.
about Todd. Man, it was really awesome hanging out with you this weekend. We went out on my boat and had some fun out on the water tubing and just hanging out, being kids, and
Breaking ribs.
yeah, breaking ribs and being kids. Yeah, we were tubing, throwing people off the tube, just having a blast. And Todd said, he told us how many days he had, and he said, I haven't been to any kind of meeting in like 2 weeks, and he said, thank you for today, because you all show me that you can have fun in sobriety, and that was really cool, man, because he saw us having fun and had something to look forward to. So I just want to say thank you for saying that. Appreciate it.
Let me chime in on that, because this is
What you got?
this is something that I find pretty hilarious. There was a point where we were on the boat, on this beautiful boat that beautiful Shane has, and we were all hanging out, and he said, let's do a meditation. So we all decide we're going to do this meditation. We're all sitting in a boat, completely quiet, not saying a word, all just relaxing. And the funniest thought came into my mind, that somebody would just come around the corner and see 6 men in a boat just standing completely still, not saying a word, and go by and go, are these guys dead?
That was hilarious.
But we're just sitting there being peaceful and calm, because we have this this thing where we're able to not really care and just be able to relax. And so that was a really cool moment we had, and it's one of the cool things we can do when we give ourselves up to, because I didn't want to do it, because and that's another thing, my ego will tell me I don't want to do something, so I have to eventually just say, you know what, I'm going to surrender to it and just do it anyway. And I had fun. So that's it's just one of those things.
Like I told you, Smitty, Saturday we're out on the boat. I walked into that meeting the first time. I wanted to give up alcohol. I'm like, shit, you guys, you want to change my whole life. I was like, I wasn't expecting this. I was going to give up alcohol and go on my merry way, but I got a lot of other things I got to work on, and it feels good changing those things, even in the 52 days that it's been. Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah, cool, Todd.
Appreciate it, Todd. This is Drew, or Drooby-Doo, as some folks call me. But the first step for me, it was definitely, like Dan mentioned, it was handed to me to get into the door. But I still, honestly, I knew that I had an issue, but it was still, that was a tough thing to admit, that I was powerless, and my life had become unmanageable. But the reason why it was tricky for me is my sponsor has this joke that I must have liked the color of his shoes whenever I asked him to be my sponsor, because I really didn't have the confidence. I didn't have that power. I didn't feel it. I just didn't feel it. And with me, again, my crutch is alcohol, but I think that it can transfer to a number of crutches. But my family, it's a family disease, and so it does come from my family, and so I was raised in that type of environment, that household. So I really, where I'm at in my recovery now, I can look back and really see that I think the reason why I struggled with admitting that I was powerless and that my life had become unmanageable is really because I hadn't experienced that before. I really didn't know. I didn't know this life that I have now because I didn't know that this was reality. I hadn't really been exposed to it. And if I'm being completely honest, I really thought that the people that said that they felt differently were just making it up, like just flat out making it up. And so I didn't struggle with it for the fact that I felt so powerful that there was no way that I could imagine myself being powerless. It was really that I just hadn't experienced the difference in that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Definitely.
Awesome, Drew. There's a couple words that all come to me, and I've taken some notes today, but two of them that come in, and they're real short ones, but they're giant words in here. One of them is that very first word in there, and we beat it to death around, but it's we. It really is, because of the truth of the matter is that I could never stay sober. I could never do that. But we seem to be able to. And then once I got some people around me to help me do this thing, got into this community, I had that. And then I started finding out we're everywhere, right? Because there really is a lot more people practicing these principles than what I thought. Just the same way that I thought everybody drank and nobody was sober, I've actually turned around and found out that there's a whole lot of people operating on these principles. The other word is yet. And that is huge in a guy, as far as I'm concerned, as far as getting that point of unmanageability into a guy's mind. Because more times than not, it really is the truth that it is, I haven't lost my job yet. My wife hasn't left yet. Haven't got a DUI yet. Because anytime a guy says, and see, I will use that to stave off my unmanageability. I will say that I have these things, that I have a nice house, got 2 cars in the garage, 2 beautiful kids, good-looking wife, a job I've held for 20-something years. I cannot possibly have a problem with alcohol.
Same story here.
Right. And for guys, that's usually where our unmanageability comes in, where we clasp to, man, because if we can say we got a job, then we're all right. For females, what it usually is if you have a family, if your family's okay. As long as CPS or somebody hasn't taken the kids away, I'm managing things okay here at home, because we really, we keep on lowering the bar to suit where our disease is taking us, that thing, well, if I ever do that, then I'll quit. And then we do that. And then we go a step lower and we go, well, if I ever did that, then I'll get some help. Mm-hmm. And we'll keep on trouncing down that line.
Well, that we thing that you mentioned, that was big to me, because in the 2 months, I've got stronger friendships from these meetings than I have in the past 25 years of being behind the bottle. Mm-hmm. Those guys, hell, I didn't know anything about them. And the guys sitting in this room, I could call any of them any time of night.
Well, it's all surface. That's the thing about the old friends, is there might be a few here and there that are deep friendships, but for the most part, when it comes to drinking, I just wanted people that drank like I did enough so I didn't feel judged. But I wasn't going to talk to them about any deep stuff, and if I did, I don't remember it.
It's a deep-seated thing to fit in.
Right, absolutely. And so that's a big part of it for me, is just realizing that, right when I came in, I just heard a guy last night that I've never met before admit, some pretty intense stuff. I've never met the guy, ever. And he said something that most people wouldn't tell somebody after 30 years. And I'd known him for 5 minutes. And he said some stuff, some very powerful stuff. Yeah. And that's what we have. That's one of the things we have here.
Well, I thought most of y'all were nuts after my first meeting.
Well, you're not.
So you are. Welcome. Out of the gates.
And then Nick comes up to me and says, "You're going to sponsor me?" And he says, "But you need to call me every day." And I went, "Shit, I don't even call my fiance every day. And now you're going to tell me I got to call you every day?" But
got to do some things different. That is the key to this thing. We got
a lot of things different.
Yeah.
Get some
Don,
structure.
you got something, buddy?
Yeah, just a little bit ago, Quentin had said, I wound up in places with people that I never thought I would wind up with. And today I sit here almost through 172 days, and not one of those days I've been truly alone like I was before. I come out of jail, believe it or not, and the first person I called was a business card that my mother had given to me. And I called him up, got his voicemail. I thought, I escaped that one. I left him a quick little, choked up voice message, and he gave me a call back, and he said, "Don, my name is Scott," and he told me a little bit of his story. And 15, 20 minutes into the conversation, me, grown-ass man, just got out of jail, I'm bawling my eyes out on the phone to this guy. Nice. And I'm saying, "Why do you want to help me?" And he said, "You don't have to understand that today, but someday you will." And I asked him probably 10 times, and he said, "You do not have to understand why. You will eventually." And today, I'm not through the steps. I'm not that far along, but I can see it.
You're a working man.
I am working the steps, and I am not alone.
Yeah, Don, cool
That's
stuff.
That's the amazing part about this recovery stuff, Don, is that the other morning, dude, I got woke up at like 5 o'clock in the morning with a phone call. Somebody who's not in recovery, doesn't really, I mean, she could use recovery, but she's not an addict or an alcoholic or a gambler or anything like that. She's just had issues going on. Her husband ended up beating the hell out of her dog, and she was scared to death that she was going to be the next one. Well, now since I've been in recovery this long, and I've been talking to this woman and her husband and became able to build relationships, I was the first person she knew to call that would be willing to help her. And when people, even outside of recovery, know that they can depend on me 24/7, that's just a gift of recovery, man. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a feeling that you never want to let go.
Yeah, cool little story right there too. I was on a retreat not too long ago, and we were in the meeting part of our retreat, and a gentleman shared about his 4-step, and he had been on it for like 4 months, and he couldn't get past one thing. He couldn't tell his sponsor one thing, and after that meeting, we broke away, and I got to talking to him about some things and told him what a 4th and 5th step did for me, and then we went on and played some volleyball and things, and then we came back later to the building, and he walked back towards that room, and something said, "Go ask him." So I followed him into that room, and nobody else was in there, and I walked in and said, "Are you ready?" He said, "Ready for what?" I said, "To tell me that one thing that you won't tell anybody." He said, "Yeah." And we sat down, we prayed about it, and he told me that one thing he's never told anybody in his life to a complete stranger. And that was my higher power working that day. It was amazing to be part of that, to listen to a total stranger tell me something that I will never speak of to anybody else. So.
Yeah, cool, Shane. Well, here's what, like getting ahead in the steps, because we're talking about step 1. Shane jumped straight up there to step 4 and 5, but it's hard to stay when you've been through them. It's hard to stay on topic into one step. As big as step 1 is, there's a lot to it. Another little pop quiz I think about. So I'll ask a question. So you got to decide 2 things, right? All right. The bottom line to me, and somewhat here, is: are you really such a freaking jerk that you did all that stuff, that you actually blew up your life, that you treated your wife and your loved ones that bad? Are you that much of a jerk that you walked through life? For me, it was stealing things. It was cheating everybody that came around me. The con man that I was. Is all that stuff really the truth? Is that who I am? Or was my operating way, I like to say, was my operating system hijacked? Am I actually sick? Because that's what we get. That's what I come to believe in this, is that I am actually ill. My spirit. I'll go down this little path. I was told when I came in here that I was spiritually sick. And what I thought you were telling me is I didn't have any religion. And I was offended. I didn't have any religion, but I was still offended, right? Well, what I've come to learn is that throughout the life of doing things and walking down a path that did not correspond with my very soul, I got my soul and my spirit sick. And when they said I was spiritually sick, that's what they meant. It didn't have anything to do with the religion. So I got to make a choice, man, and take a thing. Am I really that big a jerk, or am I sick? And once I got a hold of being that this was that powerless concept, that I was sick, that this thing was me, that, it had a hold of me, and that I really had no way out either, right? I've been completely unable to fix it using my own power. My own will, my own self-will, my own power had been completely useless. And as a matter of fact, the more I exerted my own will in trying to wrap things back up, the more I actually wrecked things, the more damage I did exerting that, And to have but I am totally blind to that without a mentor, without somebody coming and shoving the truth in my face. Because I'll sit back there on the back row and tell myself it's okay, I'm fine, I got this, I'll be okay, and do that. And then when I hit the wall real hard and got with a mentor, a sponsor in this program that actually could turn the mirror around and show me by asking a number of questions, I could get a hold of a first step concept, so to speak. It come to me like this. On a hot summer night, a guy with a ball bat and a can of pepper spray induced the beginnings of a first step on me as I broke into his parents' house stealing pain medication. A few days later, a judge told me what I'd done that I could be sentenced to 6 to 20 years in prison for what I'd done. And then the real part of it is when my sponsor showed me that even though those consequences were hanging on my neck, I continued to drink and use, knowing those consequences were staring me in the face. And when that truth was pointed at me, it became really apparent just how unmanageable and how powerless I had become. But up until then, I fought it. I'd have told you that wasn't the case. Who's got some?
You know, Dan, I hate to chime in here. I apologize. That hyphen, that our lives had become unmanageable. That same person that helped me very early on, right out of jail, he asked me, is your life unmanageable? And back to the whole, I kept telling stories. I still have a job. They don't know about this arrest. They don't know about this. And he said, well, when you were in jail, could you walk out of there anytime you want? I said, no. He said, then your life was unmanageable. It was out of your control. He said, if you have to break it down to that simple, break it down to that simple. Your life is out of control.
Yeah, because when they put handcuffs in you or put you in a jail cell,
You ain't in
you
control.
have become unmanageable.
They don't ask.
Which is, and Dan, hitting back to where you were talking about that word yet. But I always find it dangerous whenever I find myself using statements with the word but in it. And I definitely have found myself doing that back before I really started to work the steps. And it sounded a lot like what you said, Don, where it was, yeah, I drink quite a bit, but I still have a job. Or, yeah, I probably am a real dickhead to people, but I still have a job. Or I still have a woman at home. And yeah, I really do spend a lot more money than I should on really just ridiculous things, but I still have an apartment. And it's really all of that stuff before but, you can just throw that shit out the window because I'm just crapping all over that with my butt. It's, yes, I drink a lot, but I still have an apartment. In reality, that's just me quantifying that it's okay that I drink. All I'm doing is just solidifying that I really don't have a problem, is how that sounds to me.
Thanks, Drew.
I remember about, it was about 5 years before I got sober. My grandmother came to my twins' birthday party, and she looked at me and said, Shane, you finally did it. I was like, what's that? She's like, you got everything you ever dreamt of. And that hit me hard because I did. I looked back. I'd always told my grandmother all my dreams of what I wanted in life. And I told her I wanted a beautiful wife. I wanted boy-girl twins. I wanted a 2-story house with a garage and a basement. I wanted a boat. I wanted a truck. I wanted a four-wheeler. I wanted my own business. And I had all those things, but I didn't have the one thing I thought all those things would give me, which was happiness. And at that moment, I realized that my life was unmanageable, and I was powerless over a lot of things. And that's just one of my first steps towards realizing that I had a big problem, but was scared to admit it to anybody, to admit that I was powerless over it.
This is Smitty. One of the things I struggle with a lot, and a lot, I mean, I definitely did early on in sobriety, was approval. And the fact that what you thought of me was so incredibly powerful. And I didn't have any power over what you thought of me. And that's a part of my life that that I would love to have a strong power over, is to change the way you think about me. And somebody told me one time, I mean, you hang around a little bit, you hear so many different cliches and stories and
one-liners.
And after a while, you soak up so much stuff. But they said that no matter what you do, whether or not you give all your money to the poor, or you cure cancer, whatever it is, there will be people that won't like you, no matter what. You cannot do anything to change that. That's just the facts. And I had a very strong problem with that when I first heard it, because I thought, well, right, but what if I write him a really nice note, or like, send them a card,
Right.
like bake them a cake or something. And he goes, no, they'll still not like you.
They still won't like you.
And I hated that because I thought I had that power to change people's minds about the way they thought about me. And even
Everybody should like me.
absolutely, and even today, it's very much a struggle when certain things are said about you, or you hear certain things about you, and well, that's not true. But how can I convince somebody of that? Well, I can't. What I can do is control my reaction. And that's one of the things you'll learn as you start going through the steps is we're given a point where once the thing happens, we control how long we think about the particular thing. And so, but when you first come in, the idea of any of that stuff is pretty advanced. But that's something to look forward to, because there will be a point where you will have a point to where you can say, okay, I am powerless over this. What can I do to make my mood different? Because my mood has just been changed and I need to get back on course. And the best way to do that is to pick up the tools, which are the steps. And those powerless items will fly at you every day at a velocity that is incredible. Somebody called it the velocity of life, which is very, very fast. We think, we go out the door, we've meditated, we've gotten all our armor on, and immediately we got a flat tire. And we're like, I'm ready for this. Oh, and then we got to do all that all over again. It's just the first thing. And that's where unmanageability comes in also, because it's kind of like an equalizer in a studio, all the different levels going back and forth, and you got to make sure that everything is kind of balanced. And when it comes to everyday life, I'm powerless over so many things that it becomes that's sort of creates some unmanageability in itself, because I have to think so much about what I have to do today, what bills do I have to pay, all that stuff. It's a lot easier now than it used to be. Because I've taken advice, I've asked people for help. I say, I don't know what I'm doing, can you please help me? And that's something that I have to do on a daily basis with a lot of different things. Alcohol was one of the first. And there's a ton of other things in life where I have to just go, I don't know what I'm doing.
Help me.
Pause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all.
So I have an unmanageability story. I was early in recovery, and my sponsor had turned me loose to sponsor the first guy ever. And I'm all wrapped up in my insecurities about that. Am I going to mess him up? Am I going to, and that was one of the doses of powerlessness that you start learning about in future life, is that I don't have the power to get somebody sober, and I don't have the power to get them drunk either. So I use this other power that we harness in here. There's a page in the book that said, well, that's what this thing's about, is getting a power in your life that you can rely on. But anyway, this guy's sitting across the table from me, and we're trying to do this step one kind of deal and talking about it. And it's usually pretty easy for people who have really crashed into something and they know they got a problem with the alcohol, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to say. I think usually that powerlessness over alcohol is something, or drugs, or whatever your thing is. That's something you can get your arms around pretty quick. It's usually the manageability thing, and it's my experience that the males, well, that's all I sponsor, they're really resistant to the unmanageability concept. So this guy across from me says, considering everything, I think I'm managing pretty well. And I looked at him for a minute, and I thought, and we're sitting in a men's recovery center. I've been out at his car. I said, I will change the names to protect the innocent. I said, Joe, I seen your car out there, and it's got expired plates on it. You told me you don't have any insurance. All your worldly belongings are out in that car. We're sitting here working in a recovery center that you do not have the money to pay rent to stay at. I said, you haven't seen your kids in 2 years. You're on your second divorce. And you're going to tell me that you're managing things well? And he stepped back in his chair and scratched on his goatee for a minute, and he said, well, I really haven't looked at it that way.
Right? Yeah.
Until the mirror was shined and turned around, just like in my story a minute ago, what my sponsor did to me. Until that actually got turned around and shown to me by another person who had worked these steps, I was unable to see that. Who's next?
I'll go ahead and share, Dan.
Quentin, take her over, buddy.
That reminds me of when I was early in recovery. I didn't see my unmanageability until I thought I had the power to manage my life in a way that drug me into a tent next to I-65 on the south side of Louisville. But I had to become beat down emotionally and spiritually to a level to where I was willing to take suggestions, and finally sitting in that tent after a couple of weeks I was willing, and the miracle happened, man. It's been a blessing.
And that mirror had to be turned back on you
Yeah,
too, because
it
you
did.
told me you were camping.
Yeah.
And it was fun to be camping sober on the side of the interstate in somebody's tent that wasn't yours and somebody's sleeping bag that wasn't yours.
Right.
Without showers or laundry.
What
You're
about
only
you,
supposed
Todd?
to do that for a short amount of time. Well, back to what Drew was saying, like before the butt, and I mean, when I was sitting in there at a deer in headlights and listening to these people's stories, I was like, wow, I don't think I've got it that bad. And then I sat down and talked to Nick, and he was yet. And that really hit home to me. Yeah, I didn't lose my house. Yeah, I didn't lose my fiance. Yeah, I didn't lose my kid. But it was coming. Should I have had a DUI 4 nights a week? But, you know, the yet really hit home to me after my first conversation with Nick. After coming out of that meeting thinking, what the hell did I just walk into?
So you've never had any legal problems, Todd?
15 years ago I had a DUI, but
Right.
that wasn't enough for me to open up. I was just like, oh, shit happens.
Right.
I'll go on with life. 15 years ago, it was a
Fluke.
slap on the wrist.
No
And,
big deal.
Hell, I had a Florida driver's license. I left the courthouse and turned my Florida driver's license in and got a Kentucky license because computers weren't linked.
Isolated incident.
Yeah. So,
What about you, Shane?
What about me? It's not about me. That's what it is. That's what I realize now. Let's see. Unmanageability part of it. Yeah. The end of my madness, I was on the verge of losing my wife, my kids, my house, my everything. And that's what I didn't want to lose, was my wife and my kids. That's most important to me. And the last couple of days beforehand, my wife had went up to get my kids' piggy banks to get some out for something that they wanted, and I had stolen a significant amount of money out of each of their piggy banks, and I was going to put it back. It wasn't. I didn't consider that stealing. And yeah,
Like pawning things.
Yeah, I didn't pawn it.
I'll get it back.
Yeah, I'll get it back. I'll put that money back in next week. I'll be good. But my wife was going up there to get it, and I was like, you know what? I gotta tell you something, And of course, I'm coming up this lie, and I was like, I was short on work this week, so I took some money out of there. I'm gonna put it back in this week. We're good. And then my wife's like, what is going on? And she sat down and was like, why are you taking money out of there? That's stealing. I was like, it's not stealing. I'm putting it back. I mean, it's not stealing, And she knew something was wrong with me. And something inside me at that point was just screaming on the inside of me, tell her now. I mean, literally screaming. I couldn't even quiet the voice in my head. But I pulled my ego pulled me back. You got this, man. You got this. You can do it. Just hold in there. You got it. You got it. And it was just, the other one was just screaming in my ear, just tell her now. I wanted to tell so bad, but my ego just wouldn't let me, and it pulled me back, and I pulled it together and got through that lie, and I managed it at that moment, but the next week it caught back up with me. That's just part of a long story I want to tell one day and that's one of the things that kept me from pulling a trigger and killing myself, was I wanted to tell my own story. And here I am today, a little over 2 years later, telling my story to other people, and hopefully help them sharing my experience, strength, and hope.
Another part about unmanageability is the truth, and what is the truth and what isn't.
That's Smitty, by the way.
She'll set you free.
And the truth is something, if you tell it enough, if you tell the truth enough, then you don't have to worry about what you said. So you don't have to manage what you said. You don't have to put everything in a file, and you don't have to you don't have to worry about that. But one of the things that I used to do a lot was call a certain word a different word because it sounded better. And it was, so I was definitely hiding from what the actual meaning was. Like, for example,
It's kind of like being homeless, and I was always calling it camping.
there you go, exactly. Or I would take a few things when I was stealing, you know, and I would or like people say, I lifted some things. They don't like to say steal because it makes them feel bad because they know it's wrong. That's why there's jargon. That's why, you know, there's all kinds of different words for drugs, because if you just call it what it actually is, then it feels dirty. It feels
So dirty.
bad. I need to call it something different so I feel better about it. One of the things I learned later on in the steps, and definitely in the 5th step, was I'm calling certain things one thing when really they're the other. And my ability to justify things and change the way I feel about things is not, I don't really have as much power over that. I have to have somebody else be able to look at me and goes, no, it's this, it's not this. I also have to be open to that. I have to be open to that criticism and say, okay, I will believe what you tell me, and not just hold on to that. And I think most of us, when we get to the point where we've truly surrendered, we have a window. We don't always ask for help in that window, but it's a window, and it'll close.
Yeah, there is definitely a window of opportunity.
A very short one.
It'll close, and there might be more, there might not.
Right. You might die before you get there.
Absolutely. People have always, you know, it's another cliche that goes around, you know, your bottom can keep going until you're 6 feet under. And that's something that makes a lot of sense to me, because I can always get worse. There's people on death row right now that have not hit bottom. And it's mental more than physical. You can have a lot of physical attributes to your bottom that still don't, that I could deal with where other people couldn't. So that's a very important thing to remember, is just because I can deal with something doesn't mean somebody else can, and just because they can doesn't mean I can. Everybody's different as far as their surrender and their bottom.
My bottom's always had trap doors.
Well, that's one way to look at it, for sure.
So,
With the needle and thread.
yeah.
That's corny. I'm just
We're
corny.
going to go
like
around
that.
and do some final thoughts. Maybe a closing thought on step one. Do a quick, maybe a closer. Todd?
Step 1. Well, I'm still working on step 1. Even though I'm about to hit step 4, I'm still real powerless and real unmanageable.
You
But
know
it
what?
has gotten a lot better.
You know, one way I can tell you're getting it is because you're sitting here with us.
Yep.
That is true. This
That
is
is
a great
evidence.
group to be sitting with.
It's good to have you.
One of the questions I've heard people say is, how do I know when I've surrendered? Or, you know, that question about, I'm having trouble surrendering, but I don't really know how to get somebody surrendered, but I do know when you have surrendered. And it's usually about the time you've done an amend or two. Quentin?
My final thought, I'm pretty well speechless about the whole powerless and manageability part. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to get into recovery when I did, because I feel I would have been like what Smitty was talking about, being 6 foot under, if I kept on living the life the way I was living, 370 pounds and eating my way into my grave. So, and smoking cigarettes, smoking 3 to 4 packs a day, 7 days a week. Now I'm just like changing everything in life, and
You're a couple days away from 100 days off of nicotine, aren't
yes. Yep, 100
Way to
days
go.
off nicotine, 30 pounds lost in 5 weeks.
you? Way to go, man. That is
Yeah.
the other fruits of recovery.
Yes, sir.
Shane?
Thanks, Quentin. Yeah, I'm very grateful that I jumped through that window of opportunity when it happened. It all fell into place. I mean, the moment I spoke the truth, I felt like the weight of the world was lifted off of me when I told somebody that I was an addict. And it was a close friend of mine that I had taken to the brook a year prior for heroin. And I called him and told him I had a problem. And that started that ball rolling as far as knowing that, all right, here we go, let's do this. I'm all in, and I'm grateful for that day and that moment of truth. That's all I got.
Smitty, what's your closing thought, brother?
I was at a bar in the cultural part of town, and I had 2 beers, and a thought hit me. I had come to meetings, I had come to different recovery, different forms of recovery, and I wasn't willing to do any work. And I had 2 beers, and all of a sudden the thought hit me like a lightning bolt. I don't trust my thoughts anymore. I don't trust my intuition anymore. I need to ask somebody what I need to do. I was terrified of making decisions for myself anymore. That really hit me, and I finally realized that I'm ready to listen to somebody else and do something new rather than just doing it my way. That's it.
Thanks, Smitty. Don, closer.
Don here. In closing, first step isn't just the first step. I do the first step every single day, sometimes more than once. When I wake up, it's, dear God, my name's Don. I'm a real alcoholic, and I need your help today. And at the end of the day, I thank him for getting me through that day. We call it the first step, but we need to do it every day. It is the first for a reason, admission. And that's my closing.
Thanks, Don. Drew.
Drew here, or Drooby-Doo. And yeah, really, Don, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's something that I think whenever I first came in, I didn't realize at all. I thought that it was that I would do step 1 and then I'd be good. And then I'd do step 2, okay, check that off, and just keep doing that. And then somehow it would be like, in like a video game or something, you jump up and then you're set on that level from then on out. But step 1, I constantly try to take back control or power, or try to lie to myself and say that, I can manage this situation on my own, which, I've read before that this is something that you can't single-handedly beat in one-on-one combat. But there is a quote that I really like. I don't know who it's by, but it says that the only battles that I've ever won are the ones that I've just gave up or surrendered. And I just really like that. And that's, I can battle with this thing for forever and not win. But it was only whenever I surrendered and opened up to you guys and asked for that help and that guidance that I actually was able to get a little foothold.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Drew.
Thanks, Drew.
It's Dan again. What I needed to know was, could I really admit my problem, and that I was unable to fix it. I had to find a new and better source of juice, something that would replace the chemicals. I needed something that would replace that, because the old thing about the vacuum. If I don't have something to replace the thing that I have been living on, and I can admit this today, that truly I don't know that I would have survived as long as I did if I had not had the chemicals and the medicine. I really do think at some point I would have done the things so many other people who suffer with alcoholism would have done. I'd have found the coward way out and escaped. So for a long time, that alcohol and the dope worked for me. It actually kept me pumping. But when it stopped working fast. And I had to have something to replace it. And that's what I found with this fellowship and these guys around me. Another thing, I sit with guys, and I had a lot of problem getting that terminal uniqueness that this wouldn't work for me. You guys, it might have worked for. That guy, maybe. That guy over there, I don't believe. He's lost a weekend somewhere. He's not telling the truth. That thing what Drew was saying about not believing that these guys really had this. So what I was told was that, Dan, are you really going to sit here before me and tell me that you are so unique that what has worked for millions of other people is not going to work for you? You're that special? Nope. They say you have to do step one perfect. They also say this is a progress, not perfection. I like the concept of not doing it, or of doing a step one perfectly every day. That is not within my reach personally. Every day, what I can do perfectly is not put one in me, and sometimes just that at the end of the day, not putting one in me and maybe not hurting anybody today is definitely a check mark in the win column. It ended up being that basically the thing is that I just could not manage my life. I really couldn't. And I started letting this other guy manage my life. This guy I call my sponsor. I started letting him manage my life, and my life started turning around. And today I still continue to let that guy manage my life because he's doing a damn good job. And you know what I found out? Is, you know what? He just ain't very good at managing his own life either. But he's got a guy that helps him manage his, you know. And that same thing about the mirror, you know, this community, this mentoring effort that goes through this 12-step process, I think is where a whole lot of the value is. I turn loose the steering wheel and let another man take it over.
We're live right now.